Welcome back in, Geico Outkick Studios. Appreciate all of you hanging out with us. I just ran through the week in the NFL. I gave you my top five, my bottom five. Usually I talk about that with Danny G a lot. I'm going to read him my top five, bottom five. Going to kind of set the table for what was an amazing week in the NFL. We got a loaded show. Jason Whitlock's going to join us at the bottom of the hour. As I just said, he's going to hang out with us in hour 2. Petros Papadakis will be with us in hour 3. But I wanted to bring in the king of Raider Nation, Danny G, and allow him to exult over the Raiders being 2-0. I mean, look, I don't think there's any doubt. This is the biggest and best win that John Gruden has had since he came back to coach the Raiders. Derek Carr looked phenomenal. Waller couldn't be covered. Josh Jacobs continues to evolve. Henry Ruggs, a big threat downfield. Everybody has to respect him. How would you assess the performance that your team put up in their first home game in Las Vegas?
Pretty impressive, and there's been so many times the past few years where you invited me in to try to explain away what went wrong and what was bad. So it's nice for a change to see the Raiders' whole team have confidence. You saw that defense they got gashed in the first quarter. The team came alive in the second quarter, and in that defense, they were really bend but don't break in the second half of the game, and that's such a huge difference for us Raider fans because we're used to seeing our defense melt down during crunch time.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt. And I would say this, I mean, as you look at the overall sort of landscape of the NFL right now, first of all, whether or not you can stay healthy is always a big deal in the NFL. But I think it's on a different level now, and I'm not even necessarily sure that that's directly connected to COVID, although maybe there will be some teams that have health issues related to the coronavirus before all is said and done. But guys are dropping like flies right now. And I think a big part of it is just getting back into football shape is different than being in training camp. And maybe they're going to have to go back and look at the data and the analytics and say, okay, I know fans don't necessarily like the preseason, but is that an important opportunity for players to kind of ramp up their physicality so that in week 1 they're playing a quarter, in week 2 they're playing 2 quarters? Does that actually limit the overall number of injuries or not? I don't know, because you know this, Danny G. There's a lot of years where guys get hurt in preseason games, and what we all say is, oh, there it happened again. Guys down with an injury in another meaningless preseason game. That's what we say all the time. And so as you kind of look at this scenario, I hope analytically people are smart enough to consider a 6-week period, right? Look at the 4 preseason games, count the first 2 regular season games, and look at the injuries that occur over the course of that 6 weeks. But there are, I believe I'm correct in this. Dub, you can do a check for me and let me know if I'm right. I think there are right now 11 2-0 teams, if I'm not mistaken. And among those 11 2-0 teams, there are a lot of fan bases that are ecstatic, and there are some fan bases that are recognizing, hey, we're 2-0. I would put the Titans among this group. I would put the Steelers among this group. I would put the Bears in that group. They could easily be 0-2. You know, you change a couple of plays, and the difference between being 2-0 and 0-2 is minuscule. But for those 11, would you have believed, Danny G, that your Raiders were going to be one of the teams that was 2-0 coming in? And that you would be, by the way, right up there on an even playing field and almost even above the Chiefs after their near loss on the road against the Chargers?
Yeah, I mean, I can honestly say I did, and anyone who has followed my social media knows that I was big on this team because of the off-season additions they made on defense. I mean, the Corey Littleton snagging away from the Rams, that was a big deal. They drafted pretty well. They definitely focused on trying to shore up that defense, and they got a couple of great linebackers, although the guy they snagged from the Chicago Bears is hurt, to go along with what you were talking about with injuries. And you guys mentioned it on FS1 yesterday morning that the Raiders lost Trent Brown and his backup on the offensive line in week 1, and also Henry Ruggs got hurt, and he played through it. And then you saw Josh Jacobs get injured in the second half. And Dude, how tough is that guy, Clay? Alabama's finest. He still went out there and balled out to run down the clock.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've got him on my fantasy team, so every time, the injury bug is going to change. I was talking about who's going to win divisions and who's going to be in the playoffs and everything else. I mean, there's a lot of people out there in big money fantasy leagues or just competitive fantasy leagues out there where, usually you wait until the end of the preseason to have your draft in the event that somebody gets hurt. But man, I mean, some of these hits, whether you're talking about Christian McCaffrey, whether you're talking about Bosa, whether you're talking about potentially having a guy like Drew Lock out for a while, so if you got receivers out there in Denver trying to figure out exactly what's going on, and certainly Saquon Barkley is one of the top draft picks that everybody takes every single year based on his performance. To have him gone this early in the season, I mean, it's just it's a mash unit out there, and I don't think it's going to change anytime soon at all. What do you think, by the way, Danny G? We're going to talk about this, I think, with Petros, but I thought Justin Herbert was one of the most impressive performers in Week 2 overall. What he did coming in without really much of an expectation that he was going to play, being able to have the success that he did, and then having Anthony Lynn basically say, hey, we expected to win this game, we still lost, and as a result, Tyrod Taylor is going to be our starting quarterback. That seems kind of crazy to me, doesn't it? To you as well?
Yeah, it's not easy for me to admit being a Raiders fan, but I'm one of the handful of people that watched Hard Knocks, and I was impressed with Coach Lynn and the fact that they were able to do what they did to the Chiefs a couple of days ago really impressed me. If Herbert could just get that one play back and not try to do too much on that play, he could have scrambled for 10 yards. They could have kept the drive going. It was really similar to the time in the game where you saw Jalen Richard fumble tonight for the Raiders. That one part of the game where you're about to get over the hump and either you're going to blow it and give it back to the star quarterback on the other sideline or you're going to take it home. The one thing that really bugged me watching the game last night was the fact that there were no crazy 65,000 Raider fans inside that brand new amazing stadium. Can you imagine how nuts that place would have went after that 54-yard field goal by Carlson?
What did you think about that decision? Because I was watching that with my 10-year-old, and I turned to him and I said, we talked earlier, like I had the Raiders. I thought the Raiders were going to cover. I liked them in this game. But you think about that 54-yard field goal. It can get blocked. You can miss it, and with only 1 minute left, you're giving the ball near midfield to Drew Brees and that offense that just went down the field so rapidly. I'm going to be honest with you. I think there, even knowing how good of a field goal kicker Carlson is, I think I would have punted them deep, tried to pin them inside the 10 with basically a minute to go, needing to go 90 yards. I think I would have liked my chances doing that. But to Gruden's credit, he got it right, and Carlson boomed it through. What were you thinking? Not to mention bad snap, blocked field goal. There are a lot of different directions that could have gone other than what it did.
Yeah. When it was being debated on the TV screen by the broadcast crew, would you do this? I don't know about this. And they were going back and forth on it, and those were my feelings. I was kind of torn. But at the same time, that Raiders defense is a couple of years behind the Raiders offense. I think we knew, and you did a good job on FS1, and a couple of your co-hosts did as well, saying, hey, the Raiders can stay in this game because they can score points. 2 weeks in a row, they scored 34 points. The problem is once your team kind of switches to that prevent defense, like the Raiders started doing towards the end of the fourth quarter, I was screaming at my TV. That's when I hate Paul Gunther's guts. And it almost reminds me of Oscar De La Hoya, where we would be rooting for him. He'd fight an awesome, first half plus of the match, and then he would run around the ring, for the last few rounds trying to just avoid losing. And I hate that. And the Raiders and John Gruden have done that before, where it feels like they'll get a lead, and then they just try to milk the clock. You could pick up one first down, literally, and win the game, but sometimes Gruden makes Raider fans have near heart attacks. I'm happy that kick went through for Carlson, and I also heard on TV that his wife was giving birth to their child last night. He was on his way to the hospital. Imagine that night. You kick the field goal to get the first win in Las Vegas history. Then you get rushed, to the hospital to have your wife deliver your child.
Yeah, that's a hell of a night. Better than most people's nights that are listening to us right now. But that's a heck of a tandem, and it's certainly an incredible story for that kid to be able to think about and experience for the rest of their life what that feeling would be like to be a dad and a mom in that scenario. But again, if I'm Gruden, I am not making that risky decision. I am choosing to take the safe path, I think, there rather than to try to kick the field goal. And I was thinking from a gambling perspective, I'm like, man, the only way I lose here, because this is the way gamblers think, is if this kick gets blocked, then somehow the Saints go down and put this game into overtime, and then in overtime they win the toss and they get the first possession, and then they go down and score a touchdown. Then they cover. It would have been a brutal beat. So I was trying to think conservatively and make them go 90 yards. I bet I know Dub was probably thinking the same thing. That's what gamblers do. Like when we're not immediately committed to any particular team, we're just kind of working through the process of what exactly might end up happening before all is said and done. I think I teased you a little bit about the Anthony Lynn decision. Does that seem crazy to you to stick with Tyrod Taylor, even though Justin Herbert, save for one bad call, one bad decision, I should say. We don't know what the call was, but he was running. He could have easily gotten the first down. He decided to throw it down near the goal line, and it was intercepted.
Yeah, what I'm really most interested in is how in the world can Lynn go back to Taylor if his chest heals or his ribs, whatever it is. I feel like I saw enough from Herbert and enough confidence to where I would start him. How can you go to Taylor?
I kind of feel the same thing. I mean, I feel the same way that if they make the decision to go in a different direction there, he's risking losing the team because they all watch the film, and I think there are things Justin Herbert does that Taylor can't. Now, if you want to come out and say, hey, as good as he might have played in this game, he's still young. We need him to have a lot more reps in practice. This is a different kind of year than any year before. I think it makes more sense to have a veteran out there. He knows the offense better. He's been able to learn it better. All of those things could make sense if you're Anthony Lynn. But the way that he answered that, and we'll talk about this some with Jason Whitlock coming up in our conversation as we break down the NFL, the way he answered that I did not think was particularly ideal. Danny G., congratulations to your Raiders on being 2-0. I think you're going to enjoy Jason Whitlock as he slides in and hangs out with us here for the next little bit.